not leaving London.
Yes.
Or rarely leaving
Yes,
London.
yeah.
It's parallels with other people. I mean, Bosch, for instance, he left his hometown.
Yeah.
One visit to Italy, I think.
Yes, yeah.
And if you look at Bosch, I mean,
yeah,
the supper is quite biblical. You can't accuse him of not being imaginative.
yes.
I think Kafka, Sheila made very few visits. So he's a visionary son travel.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
The other point, on numerous visits to Bunhill Fields, I've noticed that on the grave and his partner's tombstone,
Yes.
there are always old top coins left on the ledge of the tombstone.
Yes.
Sometimes quite a few, other times not so much. Do you or anyone know the significance of the old coins? Is it to pay the ferryman? Is there something in the text?
I think you actually find that, I found that in many sacred places, you know, particularly going back to, I mean, I live in Devon at the moment. I used to live in London, but in Cornwall there's some megalithic engravings of labyrinths on the wall, probably about 5,000 years old, and people always leave coins there, and feathers and the pieces of ribbon. So I think they may well see them as sort of healing places, and they're giving a token, like a votive, a token.
Right.
And so in a way people are feeling that Blake has a power, I suppose, of healing.
To assist the spirit in some way?
Yeah, after
his
death.
journey?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the symbolism, I think.
But also you make a wish.
And you make a wish, exactly. So you're making a wish, and then you leave something in the hope that might be created.
But it isn't strictly true that Blake didn't leave London. He walked out of London constantly, just because he didn't go up north or somewhere. You know, in his day, Kew was the countryside, and he used to walk from Lambeth 22 miles to Walton-on-Thames and back again the same day. So he'd leave at dawn, get back about 4 in the morning, you know, but he'd still do it, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's the point, really. I mean, the fact that Catherine's father was a market gardener implies that there's lots of market gardeners everywhere, and the fields were very, very close.
Yeah, that's the countryside.
It is the countryside. I mean,
you're saying that he would go for a day's walk of 40 miles, 20 miles there, 20 miles back, in a day?
Yeah.
Day and the night.
Yeah, more, stretching it a bit, yeah.
And his...
What was the question?
The time was longer then.
The point is that Blake, although he lived in London for most of his life, apart from this trip down to Felpham on the Sussex coast, but London in those days would have been very different to today, because there would be it was very much, the countryside was coming into London, and so they were easy to walk into the green countryside around London. And so it wasn't just a poet of the streets of London. He had a real feel, I think, a direct experience of nature. That's your point, I think.
Yeah, and I think he also visited the ancients at Shoreham.
He visited the ancients at Shoreham, yes, who were Samuel Palmer, and so that's another West Sussex, East Sussex, Kent.
Wouldn't it be wonderful for Housmans to actually organise some walks around London, you know, to...
Blake's London.
Yeah, Blake's London.
Yes.
And I'm sure that there's so many people here tonight that I think it would be very popular.
There is somebody doing a walk for us about the radical history of Islington, which is where we're based, and then somebody's doing one about a radical Whitechapel as well. I've done that, so I mean, Let's say Peter Ackroyd did a map some time ago which showed all the places, and in our holiday we went round and did it. I've lost the map, so I won't be doing the walk again. But that's a good idea, that.
Some of us went to walk around Soho a few days ago. That's where I learned quite a lot more about Blake, and it's all within, a lot of stuff within one area, and it's absolutely fascinating. And we ended up in the pub where he used to go, which is a nice way to end a walk.
Yes.
Well, Tom Paine, he wrote in The Angel Islington, Tom Paine is. So I mean, I think what Peter was saying is people kind of forget, London was a lot smaller, wasn't it? And this is what you've got to get your head around. Because I mean, the Angel, where the Angel, if you read Dickens, I mean, that was a coach stop. Do you know what I mean? The Angel, where the Peacock Inn, I don't know if you know where that is, there's a blue plaque up there. That was a coach stop for people coming from London. Whereas, of course, I mean, the Angel for us is just part of central London, like where I live, it was a village, basically. And then when people like Edgar Allan Poe lived there, these were sort of rural areas and that whole sort of thing.
And if you were walking by the canals and things, that's a completely different map again. An entirely different map.
Yes.
You mentioned Goblin.
Yes.
Once, so I just wondered if you could elaborate on the connection between Goblin and...
Yes, and Blake.
You mentioned Mary Wollstonecraft.
Yes. Well, it is interesting. I mean, we're talking about London being a much smaller place. Blake, and I've written about Godwin as well, and so in a way I know more about Godwin than I do Blake. I do find they're very interesting because although one is initially starts mainly as a man of the Enlightenment, Godwin this is, as a rational thinker, under the influence of Mary Wollstonecraft he then begins to recognise what he calls the culture of the heart and develops his imagination. And Blake, but he reaches the same conclusions about wanting a society without government, where people can be in control of their own lives. And Blake, though, is on the other side of the great imagination rather than reason. Both also had this great concern with the libertarian education of the young, but they don't seem to.